Hello everyone, and welcome to In-Service 101, a course designed to help nurse educators run more effective and engaging training sessions. My name is Lindsay, I am a BSN RN, and I'll be guiding you through this course today. Before we begin, let's take a look at some of the learning objectives for this course. By the end of this module, you should understand what an in-service is and why it is important that you are running them for your staff. You should also understand what common barriers prevent an in-service from having the desired effects on your staff. And with these in mind, we will next dive into some adult learning theory and learn how you can apply these principles to be able to deliver an engaging and effective in-service that your staff won't soon forget. So to begin, if you've never run one before, you might be thinking, what is an in-service? Quite simply, in-services are training sessions which are planned and take place within the institution, so the hospital, during an employee's working hours. They are also deliberately planned to meet the needs of the employee in executing their job functions. Additionally, they are a part of continuing education, which is a mandatory requirement for nurses in most provinces and territories. Common examples of in-service delivery include lunch and learns, where an information session is delivered during an employee's meal break with a meal provided, and regular unit training sessions. The actual subject matter of the in-service can include anything from new technologies or equipment being used on the unit to a review of certain medical conditions or standards of care, which may be common on the unit. Now that you're familiar with what an in-service is, let's look at why they are important. For starters, in-services help nurses to remain current with their knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and they prepare nurses to deal with the rapidly changing health needs of society. Now, it is important that in-services are run regularly and according to current practice standards, as the knowledge gained from continuing education sessions is estimated to only be valid for about 2 to 5 years. Most importantly, research has shown that frequent continuing education sessions for nurses have been directly associated with higher quality nursing care, and this includes better patient outcomes, shorter hospital stays, and decreased patient morbidity and mortality. In addition to, among nurses, a higher productivity, better job performance, less medication errors, and increased job satisfaction. And it's important to note that the World Health Organization declared that the performance of the healthcare system will ultimately depend on the knowledge and skills of the individuals behind the healthcare delivery. So it's clear to see why continuing education and particularly in-services are so valuable. Now, why is it important for this learning to take place within the hospital and not, say, at home or in a classroom? Well, research has shown that nurses actually prefer to learn in their workplace, and in order for nurses to maintain professional development, continuing education needs to be integrated into the workplace. Additionally, if we look at education effectiveness, clinically integrated learning has been shown to improve knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors, whereas classroom learning has been shown predominantly to improve only knowledge. Several studies have identified various barriers to the implementation of effective in-services, including staff shortages, limited time, an absence of supportive work environments, irrelevance to current work, etc. And as a result of this, registered nurses often experienced in-service training programs as being inadequate, and they reacted negatively towards them. But this isn't going to happen to your staff, because I am going to show you what techniques and principles are going to make for an overall better in-service. Before we get into specifics, let's look at some adult learning theory, which is going to guide us in the implementation of our in-service. Adult learning theory was first described by Malcolm Knowles in 1984 and relies on 5 key assumptions. 1, that adults are independent and self-directing. 2, that they have accumulated a great deal of experience, which is a rich resource for learning. 3, that they value learning that integrates the demands of their everyday life. 4, they are more interested in immediate problem-centered approaches than in subject-centered ones. And 5, they are more motivated to learn by internal drives than by external ones. So what does this all mean for you? And why is it important to keep adult learning theory in mind when planning an in-service? Let's find out. According to the first principle of adult learning theory, adults are independent and self-directing. Fortunately for us, the research has shown that nurses actually want to learn. And in one study, in fact, most nurses plan to pursue continuing education even though it was self-financed. And this is really encouraging for us as educators, and it highlights the need for us to provide learning opportunities. So how do we apply this principle to our in-services? We can involve staff in identifying their own training needs and the planning of in-service delivery. And I cannot stress this enough. Poll your staff. Really get a feel for what it is they are interested in learning about and what they feel is most relevant to their work on the unit. It's also really important to create a unit culture that encourages continuing education so that your staff feel that they and their needs are being supported. Research has shown that in-services are more effective when management is actively involved and participates in the delivery of in-service education. Now, according to our second principle, adult learners have accumulated a great deal of experience, which is a rich resource for learning. In one study, nurses felt that their knowledge and expertise were not taken into account by their superiors and that they lacked support from their supervisors. In order to avoid this, we should be taking into account nurses' previous experiences and using this as a basis for our learning activities. We should also be providing opportunities for staff to interact with one another and share their experiences to facilitate learning, such as during structured discussion groups or debriefing sessions. These considerations are also supported by another important learning theory, Lev Vygotsky's social constructivist theory, which states that knowledge originates in social interactions. So, with this in mind, it's important that we as educators support interpersonal relationships as a tool for learning. Moving on to Principle 3. Adult learners value learning that integrates the demands of their everyday life. Well, what does this mean for us? Well, it is important to ensure that the topics we select for our in-services are relevant to our everyday practice. In order to do this, we should consider current practice issues or patient conditions that are common on the unit and formulate our training needs around these issues. Lev and Wagner, two other important learning theorists, coined the term situated learning, which is learning that occurs in the workplace and incorporates the sharing of information between beginners, novices, and experts. And this is something important to keep in mind as we move on to some practical applications of this principle. Case-based learning and clinical simulations are two ways you can encourage more situated learning. Case-based learning involves presenting an actual or theoretical clinical case and associated materials, and then posing questions to your staff and encouraging discussion. And this technique has consistently been associated with some very positive learning outcomes. Clinical simulations involve assigning roles to your staff and simulating a situation which may commonly occur in your practice. For example, running a code blue or inserting a central line. Some best practice guidelines for ensuring clinical simulations are an effective tool for learning include providing feedback, likely during debriefing sessions, and encouraging deliberate practice, which is repetitive practice of a skill with feedback, error correction, mastery, and advancement to the next level. Our fourth principle of adult learning theory states that adults are more interested in immediate, problem-centered approaches than in subject-centered ones. One way we can apply this to our in-services is through problem-based learning. It's similar to case-based learning. You would present a case, assign your staff various tasks, and together answer questions about the case. The difference here is that each staff member would answer their own questions individually before discussing as a group. And this approach is effective as it really empowers learners by enabling them to find their own answers. It also fosters what educator Henry Jenkins called a participatory culture, where individuals work together and each individual's contribution matters. In order to be maximally effective, once again, it is important to consider current practice issues on your unit to ensure relevance. Finally, Knowles' adult learning theory stipulates that adults really are motivated and willing to learn. So remember to encourage continuing education on your unit. And no matter what modality you choose for running your in-service, keep in mind that some commonalities exist to predict effectiveness. Mainly, that learning that involves active participation, like clinical scenarios or case-based learning, as opposed to passive techniques, such as lecturing or independent reading, are more effective for conveying information, and that repetitive practice with feedback is important for success across all modalities. We have now reached the end of this course. I hope you found this module to be helpful, and you are now confident in your ability to run an informative and engaging in-service on your unit. Until next time, everyone.